We like to imagine prehistory as nature's most aggressive job interview. Strong legs, hired; sharp spear, promoted; bad knee, please clear out your cave desk by sunset. That version is convenient. It is also probably wrong. Across Ice Age Europe and Western Asia, archaeologists have found human remains belonging to people who were blind, deaf, severely injured, unable to chew properly, or born with conditions that would have made survival alone nearly impossible. And yet they lived for years, sometimes decades. Someone fed them. Someone helped them move. Someone stayed behind when leaving would have been faster. Which creates a very awkward problem for the old idea that ancient life was simply survival of the fittest. Because the evidence suggests that some of our ancestors survived precisely because the group refused to abandon its least physically fit members. So perhaps the first great human survival strategy was not strength. It was care. Caring for an injured person sounds simple until you remember that, for most of human evolution, there were no clinics, no antibiotics, no canned soup, and absolutely no customer service department for the Pleistocene. Before our ancestors could support anyone who was sick, elderly, or disabled, they first had to become a species capable of supporting anyone at all. That required a major evolutionary shift. Most mammals survive by becoming independent as quickly as possible. Human children took the opposite approach. They arrived helpless, stayed helpless for an almost suspicious amount of time, and demanded years of food, protection, instruction, and emotional crisis management. A baby antelope can stand within hours. A human baby needs months just to discover its own feet. This long childhood forced early human groups to cooperate. Mothers could not gather food, avoid predators, maintain shelter, and carry a dependent child without help. Fathers, grandparents, siblings, and unrelated group members increasingly became part of the childcare system. Anthropologists sometimes call this cooperative breeding, although that phrase makes the family sound like a very organized animal rescue program. Food sharing became equally important. A hunter might return with enough meat for many people, while another person returned with nothing except an impressive story about the animal that escaped. Gatherers brought back plants, roots, nuts, and insects that could be distributed across the group. Success stopped belonging entirely to the individual. Calories became social. That matters because once a community regularly shares food, helping someone who cannot hunt is no longer an entirely new behavior. It is an expansion of an existing one. Our ancestors also developed increasingly complex social intelligence. They needed to remember alliances, predict other people's intentions, recognize distress, and understand that another person's pain was not merely an inconvenient noise. Empathy did not appear as a magical moment when one caveman suddenly discovered feelings. It likely grew from older mammalian systems of parental care, attachment, and group bonding. But humans pushed those systems further. Cooperative hunting rewarded trust. Childcare rewarded patience. Food sharing rewarded memory and reciprocity. Living in dangerous environments rewarded groups whose members believed that support would still exist after an accident. That belief changed behavior. A hunter may take greater risks when he knows a broken leg will not mean immediate abandonment. A skilled toolmaker can recover from injury instead of becoming disposable. An older person can continue teaching long after losing the strength to chase prey. Care was not the opposite of survival. It was survival, distributed across multiple bodies. And once humans built that social foundation, a healed bone could begin to reveal something extraordinary. Archaeologists rarely uncover compassion in a dramatic pose. There is no fossilized caregiver kneeling beside a patient, no prehistoric thank you card, and no cave wall labeled, "This is where Greg brought me soup." Instead, they find damage, a skull cracked by trauma, a jaw missing most of its teeth, a limb that healed badly, a joint worn down so severely that every step must have hurt. These injuries are not just evidence of suffering. In the right circumstances, they are evidence of survival after suffering. Bone is unusually useful because living bone reacts. When it fractures, the body begins rebuilding the damaged area. New tissue forms, the break stabilizes, and over time the injury may partially or completely heal. That process takes weeks, months, or sometimes years. So when archaeologists identify extensive healing, they know the individual did not die immediately after being injured. The real question is whether that person could have survived the recovery alone. A broken rib may be painful without making someone completely dependent. A shattered leg is different. So is severe blindness, advanced arthritis, paralysis, or the loss of an arm in an environment where food must be gathered, carried, processed, and defended. Researchers therefore examine not only the diagnosis, but also what the condition would have meant in that particular landscape. Could the individual walk? Could they chew? Could they collect water, escape predators, or regulate body temperature without assistance? This is the logic behind what researchers call the bioarchaeology of care. The method begins with the physical evidence, estimates the person's functional limitations, and then asks what kind of support would have been required for that person to remain alive. That support might have included sharing food, softening tough meat, cleaning wounds, carrying water, protecting someone during travel, or slowing the group's movement. None of this proves that ancient caregivers felt compassion in exactly the way we describe it today. Bones preserve biological consequences, not private emotions. A group might have helped someone because of affection, obligation, social status, valuable knowledge, family ties, or a combination of all five. Prehistoric motives did not come with subtitles. But severe disability followed by long-term survival creates a powerful inference. When an individual could not meet basic needs independently, yet continued living long enough for injuries to heal or disease to progress, somebody else was probably doing part of the work. That is why a damaged skeleton can become social evidence. The fracture tells us what happened to one body. The healing tells us what other bodies did next. The most famous patient in this prehistoric medical archive is Shanidar I, a Neanderthal discovered in Shanidar Cave in northern Iraq. His skeleton reads less like a biography and more like someone repeatedly selected hard mode. A major injury damaged the left side of his skull and probably impaired his vision. His right arm was severely wasted, fractured, and missing below the elbow. He also had leg and foot injuries that would have produced a pronounced limp, along with serious hearing loss. Yet the damage showed healing, and he survived into roughly his late 30s or 40s, an advanced age for the population around him. He was not necessarily helpless every hour of every day. He may still have gathered plants, processed materials, made tools, watched children, or shared knowledge. But surviving with that combination of impairments almost certainly became easier because other people adjusted around him. Then there is CN 46700, an inner ear fragment from a Neanderthal child at Cova Negra in Spain, informally nicknamed Tina. Researchers reported abnormality consistent with Down syndrome and argued that the child may have experienced profound hearing loss, vertigo, and serious balance problems. The child survived beyond 6 years of age. That does not allow us to reconstruct every meal or every comforting hand. It does, however, raise a difficult practical question. In a mobile foraging community, how could one parent continuously protect a child with major developmental and sensory challenges while also collecting food, traveling, and surviving? The researchers' answer was shared care. France offers another complicated case. La Chapelle aux Saints I, once called the Old Man, suffered from degenerative joint disease and extensive tooth loss. Earlier interpretations claimed that others must have prepared every meal for him. Later reassessments showed that he retained more chewing ability than the legend suggested. So, not prehistoric pudding service. Still, his age and accumulated disease indicate that Neanderthal life did not automatically end when the body stopped operating at factory settings. Much later, around 11,000 years ago in southern Italy, Romedo II reached late adolescence despite a rare form of dwarfism that shortened the limbs and likely limited mobility and participation in some subsistence tasks. Whether this proves intensive daily caregiving remains debated, but his survival and inclusion within the community show that physical difference did not necessarily lead to rejection. Each case has uncertainties. Together, however, they form a pattern: injured adults, disabled children, elderly individuals, and physically different people continued living inside human groups. The archaeological record does not preserve kindness directly. It preserves the people kindness may have kept alive. Here is where the comforting story becomes scientifically inconvenient. A healed injury can demonstrate survival. It cannot tell us why anyone helped. Perhaps Shanidar I was cared for because his group loved him. Perhaps he was a respected relative. Perhaps he knew where water remained during droughts, remembered dangerous migration routes, or could transform a lump of stone into something sharper than the average workplace disagreement. Compassion and usefulness are not mutually exclusive. Modern people often demand a clean choice. Either prehistoric care was emotionally generous or coldly practical. Real human behavior rarely cooperates with categories that tidy. Evolutionary biologists have several possible explanations. Kin selection suggests that helping relatives can preserve shared genes. Reciprocal cooperation proposes that individuals help because support may later be returned. Reputation also matters. Someone known for sharing food or protecting an injured companion may become a more trusted partner. But these explanations become harder to apply when care is expensive, prolonged, and unlikely to be repaid. A severely disabled child cannot promise future hunting success. An older adult with permanent mobility problems may never physically pay back years of assistance. Such cases do not eliminate practical motives, but they weaken the idea that prehistoric caregiving was simply an ancient insurance policy with very aggressive cancellation terms. Another debate concerns how dependent these individuals actually were. Researchers must reconstruct movement and daily function from incomplete skeletons. A missing hand does not automatically mean complete helplessness. Arthritis does not affect every person identically. Someone unable to hunt large animals might still gather plants, repair tools, prepare hides, teach children, preserve fire, or recognize seasonal changes. Weakness depends on the task. This is why cautious archaeologists avoid turning every healed fracture into a prehistoric hospital drama. Some injuries may have required only brief assistance. Others could have been survived through individual adaptation. The strongest arguments for long-term care come from combinations of severe impairments, extended healing, and environmental demands that would have made independent survival highly improbable. There is also the danger of projecting modern morality backward. Neanderthals did not need our concept of charity to help one another. Their care may have emerged from attachment, obligation, habit, grief, status, or an instinctive refusal to abandon familiar people. We cannot excavate a motive. What we can excavate is cost. Food was shared. Travel may have slowed. Protection had to be extended. Time and energy were invested in bodies that could not always contribute in obvious ways. Whether that behavior began as love, strategy, duty, or all three, it produced the same revolutionary outcome. The vulnerable remained part of the group. Care did more than rescue isolated individuals. Over time, it may have changed what a human group actually was. A band of hunters and gatherers is not simply a collection of strong bodies moving in the same direction. It is a network of memory, obligation, skill, and trust. Once people began feeding injured companions, protecting disabled children, and supporting older adults, survival stopped being measured only by what each person could do alone. That created a new kind of strength. An injured hunter might no longer chase prey, but he could repair tools, teach techniques, identify tracks, or remember where animals crossed a valley 20 winters earlier. An elderly woman might move slowly, yet know which roots were edible, which plants reduced pain, and how long the group had before the river flooded. In a world without books, every experienced person was a walking hard drive. Admittedly, the storage system complained about its knees. Care also allowed knowledge to survive biological bad luck. If every serious injury removed a skilled individual from the group, valuable information disappeared with them. Supporting recovery protected not just a person but the techniques, stories, and relationships stored inside that person. The same system strengthened cooperation. When group members expected help after illness or injury, they could take calculated risks together. Large game hunting, long-distance travel, childbirth, and defense became less terrifying when failure did not automatically mean abandonment. Trust made dangerous cooperation possible, and dangerous cooperation made humans formidable. As communities grew more stable, caregiving could become organized. Food had to be divided. Travel routes had to account for slower members. Someone had to watch children, prepare softer meals, maintain warmth, or remain with a person who could not move easily. These were not hospitals or formal welfare programs. Nobody at Shanidar Cave was completing an injury reimbursement form, but they were systems. Eventually, care became entangled with ritual. The sick might be treated with plants, heat, massage, immobilization, or practices whose medical value remains uncertain. The dead were sometimes placed carefully, connecting relationships in life with treatment after death. Assistance was no longer merely a reaction to injury. It became part of how communities understood duty, identity, and belonging. This may have offered human groups a profound evolutionary advantage. Communities that preserved knowledge, shared risk, and maintained strong bonds could withstand environmental shocks better than those built around disposable individuals. Civilization did not suddenly appear when someone planted grain or stacked stones into a wall. Its emotional infrastructure was older. Long before cities protected vulnerable people with laws and institutions, small communities were already making the decision that transformed a crowd into a society. Your survival is also our problem. Today, Caring for vulnerable people happens through hospitals, families, charities, disability services, emergency teams, and laws that recognize dependence as a normal part of human life. The technology is new, the instinct is not. Every ambulance, meal delivered to an elderly neighbor, wheelchair ramp, and parent rearranging an entire day around a sick child belongs to a behavioral tradition far older than cities. The scale has changed, but the essential decision remains familiar. Someone cannot manage alone, so other people reorganize themselves. That decision is easy to romanticize from the comfort of modern life. Prehistoric care was probably exhausting. It cost calories, time, mobility, and sleep. It may have caused arguments. Some people were almost certainly treated better than others. Human communities were not automatically gentle simply because a few skeletons healed. Compassion has never required perfection. It requires interruption. Someone had to interrupt the hunt to carry water. Interrupt the journey to wait for slower feet. Interrupt their own hunger to share food. At some point, survival stopped meaning that the strongest individual reached tomorrow. It began to mean that the group arrived together. And that may be one of the deepest reasons humans became so successful. We are physically unimpressive animals with fragile skin, slow children, inconvenient backs, and a remarkable talent for damaging our knees. Alone, we are vulnerable. Together, we turn vulnerability into a reason to cooperate. The weakest members of ancient communities were not always abandoned, and they were not necessarily useless. Some carried memories, skills, relationships, or simply identities that others refused to erase. Their healed bones preserve no speeches about dignity. They preserve something better. Evidence that somebody acted. So perhaps prehistory was not nature's most aggressive job interview after all. A bad knee did not always mean clearing out the cave desk by sunset. Sometimes the group adjusted the workload. Sometimes they shared dinner. Sometimes they stayed. And beneath all our medicine, institutions, and carefully worded policies, humanity may still rest on that ancient, stubborn choice: nobody gets left behind.